I think he's got some pretty good genes, don't you? My very pleasant duty is to introduce a close friend of mine and a great citizen, Mike Bloomberg. When I think of Mike, I think of triple threat. You know, in the sports world, the kind of person that comes along once every generation, who's a great pitcher, a great catcher, a great fielder, and so forth. So let me take three aspects of Mike's life just to illuminate a bit what kind of a person he is. First, his public elected office. How would we assess his performance? Preparing for this occasion today, I asked person after person, what kind of a mayor was Mike Bloomberg? I was unable to get a single person who did not think he'd done a good job in a very difficult city. Secondly, what about his entrepreneurialship? Well, here his record is nothing less than spectacular. He started with a small piece of technology and information. He deepened it, he broadened it, he expanded it, until today it is one of the largest technology companies anywhere, and it operates in 73 different countries. What about his philanthropy? Well, listen to this record. He's contributed so far well over $3 billion to charity. I said billion, not million. And what impressed me about it, and I've reviewed many of his projects, is not only the breadth of the projects, but the imagination that went into them. I'll give you some examples. In education, he has a very interesting project designed to help low-income students get into college. He continues to take a lead role in reducing our consumption of tobacco. He plays a global role on the environment and has been given the title that I don't understand, called Sylvan or something of that sort, by the UN for supervising major sections of the philanthropic movement. So I think we do really have a triple threater today and a great American citizen. And I'm happy to introduce to you former Mayor Mike Bloomberg.
Well, Pete, thank you, and good morning, everyone. Pete was very generous, and I must tell you that he did have an awful lot to do with my career. I watched him when he ran Lehman Brothers. That helped me build Bloomberg. As mayor, he was never short of advice on what I should do. But the philanthropy is really more interesting, of his involvement with my philanthropy. What limited the philanthropy was the way he pays off his debts. He and I and Greenspan played golf one time. I think the course was Friar Head out on the eastern Long Island, and don't know why, but I won. These two guys paid me in Iraqi money. Not terribly useful in the philanthropic world these days. But he did help later on when I played another time with him, and this time, lo and behold, I won again. And he paid me the $2 that I won in pennies. He thought he was brilliant in doing this. A week later, he received a letter from me in the mail thanking him for including in those 200 pennies a 1927 upside-down reverse-printed coin that was worth $75,000, and I just sold it. Pete's response was something I cannot tell you here in public company. Anyways, I think we all know who Pete Peterson is and the contribution that he has and Joan have made and Michael is now making to this country and certainly to New York City. It's good to be back here in D.C. I was here the other day, and I'm coming back in another week. Last night, I went to the Rangers game, which, if you're a Ranger fan, was not very good. They got blown out 6-2. The real problem with it is I got home at 11:30 and had to get up at 4:30 this morning to get here to make sure, in case the weather was bad, I could be here for Pete. But it was a sacrifice that I'm happy to make, but one I will not let him forget. Don't worry about it. Anyway, seriously, it is great to be here at this summit, and I have to hand it to Pete and his foundation for bringing such a great group together to talk about the future of our country. Pete deserves a lot of credit for all his work he's done to raise awareness about the needs for greater fiscal responsibility, and that doesn't just mean cutting your taxes or raising your taxes or cutting spending. It means investing wisely and not saddling the next generation with the responsibilities that we should be fulfilling today. And those are the ideas that really are at the heart of this summit. And since I have the honor of kicking it off today, let me start by raising a few questions. First, if we really want America to be the most advanced economy for decades to come, shouldn't we be investing more in science and research, the science and research that fuels innovation and entrepreneurship, even if it requires raising new revenue? If we really want companies to grow here, shouldn't we assure we have the best educated workforce in the world, even if it means challenging the special interests who represent the adults in the public school system, not the students? And if we really want to ensure that our companies can grow, shouldn't we be allowing more talented and hardworking immigrants to live in our country instead of subsidizing their college education and then kicking them out of the country so that they can go to work for our competitors? Of course we should. But this, as we all know, is Washington. So what makes sense usually doesn't make good politics for one party or the other or both. And politics, unfortunately, seems to be all that matters in this town. Over the past 15 years, under both Democratic and Republican Congresses and both Democratic and Republican presidencies, Washington has consistently given us the worst of both worlds. No reform of entitlements that fuel our debt, and precious little investment that fuels our economy. No issue, I think, better exemplifies that lack of investment than transportation. And since the Highway Trust Fund is a topic of conversation here in Washington this very week, I thought I'd spend a little time discussing it just to give you a time frame of what's going to happen and how we have to deal with it. About 7 years ago, I teamed up with Ed Rendell and Arnold Schwarzenegger, two governors from different parties, to create a group called Building America's Future. Former Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood is now a co-chair of this group, and we are glad to have him. And together, we are trying to sound the alarm about the need for more infrastructure spending here in Washington. It shouldn't take a tragic Amtrak accident to put infrastructure at the top of the agenda, and yet, even that didn't do it. This week, the big debate in Congress is whether to patch the Highway Trust Fund for 2 months or 6 months. Talk about setting the bar low. Apparently, the three scariest words in Washington are gas tax increase. The White House and congressional leaders in both parties run for the hills whenever they hear it. In fairness, there are a few members of Congress in both parties who have put forward proposals to raise the federal gas tax, and I applaud them for it. The case for increasing the tax could not be any clearer. It has been 18.4 cents per gallon since the year 1993, the longest we have ever gone without an increase, and today that 18.4 cents is worth only 11 cents. At the same time, cars are more fuel efficient and driving has leveled off. So in real dollars, we are bringing in much less money. And at the same time, our roads and bridges and transit networks have gotten 22 years older. No CEO in America, and certainly no economist, would look at this investment model without cringing. Now, President Obama, I think, deserves credit for putting forward an ambitious infrastructure plan, but this ought to be a bipartisan issue, and it used to be. It was a Republican president, remember, who pushed a Republican Congress to authorize the Transcontinental Railroad. Thank you, Mr. Lincoln. 2 Republican presidents started work on the Hoover Dam, Coolidge and Hoover, before Franklin Roosevelt saw it to completion. And of course, it was a Republican president who had the foresight to authorize the interstate highway system. Today, it's worth remembering why Eisenhower made that such a priority. As a young Army captain, Eisenhower participated in the Army's first motor convoy across America. At that time, our roads were so bad that the journey took 62 days. Later, he shipped off to Europe, where he was impressed by the sophisticated railroads crisscrossing other countries, and that experience ultimately led him to push for the construction of what he called mighty network of roads to connect our entire country. The interstate highway system fundamentally transformed America and the way that we did business, fueling decades of unprecedented economic growth. The good news is infrastructure actually is still a bipartisan issue, just not in Washington. While Congress shirks its responsibility, mayors and governors are stepping up. In Utah, the Republican legislature and Republican governor just adopted a law that raised the state gas tax by 5 cents and ties future increases to prices at the pump. Iowa's Republican Governor Terry Branstad signed a bill raising the gas tax in his state, which passed with Republican support. Michigan's Republican Governor Rick Snyder couldn't get the legislature to raise the gas tax, so he took the issue directly to voters. That didn't work, but he's not giving up. And you just got to give this guy a lot of credit for having the guts to be honest with voters about the problem. Those governors and state legislators have shown more bravery in raising gasoline taxes because voters hold them, not Congress, responsible for the condition of their roads and bridges. So here's what I suggest. Every time you drive across a pothole, every time you have to get your shock absorbers adjusted or your tires changed, every time you're stuck in traffic, call your senator and member of Congress and tell them that they are costing you money and ruining your lifestyle, and tell them that you'd rather pay a few extra pennies at the pump than hundreds of dollars at the garage. And also tell them that you're going to vote and support their opponent, no matter how bad their opponent is on this issue, unless they, who are in office to serve the public, do something about it, and doing it now. That is the only thing that is going to get their attention. And if you think it doesn't get their attention, just look at the power of some of these single-issue advocacy groups like the NRA, the AARP, and teachers' unions. These elected officials listen, and they listen to one thing, and they want one thing. They want to keep their jobs. And if you can help them do it, or on the other hand, keep them from staying in office, they will listen and they will act. And I am so cynical after all of these years of dealing in Washington. That is the only thing they think about and the only thing that's going to get results. But also, we've got a lot of examples. It really does work. Now, back in Eisenhower's day, the U.S. spent close to 5% of its GDP on infrastructure. Europe still spends about that much. China and other Asian countries spend twice that amount. While we argue about American exceptionalism, the rest of the world is passing us by. Everybody's afraid to face the issue, but you only have to travel around the world to realize what is happening to us. We here in America now spend less than 2% of U.S. GDP on infrastructure, which is a 20-year low. And remember, the vast majority of that money comes from cities and states, not the federal government. The fact is the federal government has abdicated the leadership role it long played on infrastructure. And as a result, we're losing a crucial part of our competitive edge in the global economy, and we're losing out on economic growth that would generate the tax revenue that we need to pay for everything else. Other countries are making these investments because they know that businesses will go to the cities that have the fastest and most extensive transit networks, the deepest, biggest ports, and the most modern and efficient airports. I've never heard of anyone that disagreed with that idea, but both parties to pick up the bill is an entirely different matter. So allow me to offer a couple of ideas of how to break the logjam. The first is a simple trade. Both parties today reject it out of hand, at least publicly, but maybe it just might work because it is so unpalatable to everybody. So here it is. The Republicans should bite the bullet and vote to hike the gas tax and index it to inflation. And Democrats should bite the bullet and vote to repeal or scale back either the Davis-Bacon Act, which requires governments to set prevailing wages for federal construction jobs, or the Buy America Act, which adds costs to mass transit projects. That would ensure that taxpayers are getting the most bang for their buck, and that we would build the infrastructure that we need so businesses can grow, people can have jobs, and the tax base will give us the money we need to do things like fund basic research, take care of those in need, and make sure that this country remains safe. I would suggest that you not hold your breath, however, if I think that's going to happen. But if we talked only a little bit about these things that are only likely to happen, we'd never make any progress. Washington would be practically moot. So here's a second idea. We could repurchase the Highway Trust Fund into a matching program. Whenever revenues rise, revenue states raise through their own gas taxes, whatever revenue they raise through their own gas taxes, Washington would match it, with the caveat that it must be spent on infrastructure. That would encourage states with the greatest infrastructure needs to raise their gas taxes, and the states with fewer needs can keep their gas taxes low if that's what they want. That is a more efficient way to distribute transportation dollars than the convoluted and politically driven formulas that now exist. States that don't have major transportation needs could set low gas taxes. States with more needs could set higher taxes. And the truth is that some states have more roads than they need because Congress distributes monies based on pork barrel politics, not economic needs, and other states are starving for money. This is not a red state, blue state issue. As it happens, incidentally, of the states with the 15 highest gas taxes, 8 have Democratic governors and 7 have Republican governors. We've got to do something about it. The problem with that proposal, of course, is if you want to drive from here to there, you have to go through their states. And that's why infrastructure is an issue for all of us. And all of us should care about how every state handles the infrastructure issue and how the infrastructure is distributed all around our country. We have to have airports that can take all our planes. We have to have roads that all our trucks and cars can go over. We have to have rail tracks that our railroad trains can go through their states to get someplace else. We are in this together, and there's no evidence that Congress is willing to face that issue. Now, there are other good ideas for improving the way we fund infrastructure, including an infrastructure bank that would fund projects based on economic merit. All of these ideas deserve consideration. I will say when it comes to a federal infrastructure bank, I'm a little bit put off. In New York City taxpayers reached into their pockets and in 12 years redid virtually every bridge and tunnel in New York City, with the exception of the Brooklyn Bridge where we got some federal aid. And then other states come along and say, oh, high taxes in New York City, move your businesses to our cities. There'll be lower taxes, except that now they're screaming the federal government, meaning you and me and New Yorkers, should help pay for the infrastructure. It may not be fair, but even I would be willing to support that, no matter how unfair it is. All of these ideas, and I'm sure every one of you have others, deserve consideration. But instead of having that debate, Congress is doing, as we all know, what it does best, the bare minimum, kicking the can down a pothole-filled road. If you wondered how I was going to tie that in, it's a good analogy. If we want to keep moving forward as a nation, seriously, we need to start working together, like we did back in Eisenhower's time, across party lines and across state lines. There have been a few encouraging signs of bipartisanship recently, including on Trade Promotion Authority, but we need more of it, especially on infrastructure. So I hope that today, as you discuss the wise investments and tough decisions that our country needs, you'll spend some time talking about ways to break the infrastructure logjam. That's the only ways that we can attract the best businesses and the best jobs and continue leading the world economy. Past generations, our parents and grandparents, had the courage to make these investments, and now it is our turn. If you don't want to make the investment, just take a look at your kids and grandkids and say, what kind of a world do you want to leave them? We have a responsibility to the next generation, as previous generations did for us. And if we do, the future of America will be brighter than ever. And if we don't, we are going to fall behind, and it makes it awful hard to catch up when you don't have the big mo behind you. I want to thank Pete for putting us together today. This is an important conference. We really have to pull together and figure out how we can get things done. And incidentally, it is as good a time as any to do it. There's an awful lot of people that want to be President of the United States. There's an awful lot of people that want to be senators and congressmen. We've got to, it's our responsibility, make them stand up and face the big issues and not let them be trapped by a few fringe people at either end of the political spectrum. Thank you very much for having me, and God bless.